I'm Dr. Jeff Kaplan, and for over 30 years I've traveled the globe from Dubai to Moscow and Johannesburg, from Singapore to Shanghai and Istanbul. I've studied the world's best businesses and the people that run them. But something is very different now. From the boardroom to the break room, there's a growing realization that our relationship with work is broken. But it's not too late. You still have a choice. Hold on to the past and struggle to survive, or join the willing, change, and thrive in the world of tomorrow that's already arrived. So if you're willing to think different, willing to work different, willing to change at the speed of now, then you're willing to win. Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Kaplan.
And I'm Tara Thomas Getman. This is our final episode of Willing to Win Season 1, and we're so happy that you've come alongside us to hear all the depth and breadth of our story about how our relationship with work is changing. Perhaps nowhere has that been more apparent during the past year and a half than education, especially in higher education, where the campuses were upended when everyone went to initially virtual and now oftentimes a hybrid learning environment.
Yeah, and what a great way to end the season, right? This season is all about learning about ourselves and our relationship with work and our relationship with getting things done, right? And so to be able to have an episode that's focused entirely on education is such a treat. And one of the things that was exceptional about this episode is when we realized that the pandemic was going to be as big an issue as it was, we realized that there was an amazing educational opportunity, an opportunity to learn about how things get done in organizations. Because for the first time in my entire career, all of the organizations, whether it's for-profit organizations or educational institutions, were focused on the same strategy at the same time. What a better way to learn about strategy and how people approach getting things done than to examine how they responded to the pandemic. And that's exactly what we did.
That's such a good point. It was the one time when everything aligned to really maximize the research capabilities that you have made your career on, to dive deep into these circumstances that, forced everybody to say, okay, we now have to pivot to this new way of doing things. And in the case of higher education institutions, that meant thrusting everybody into a virtual world and out of that in-person classroom experience. So many of these higher education thought leaders wanted to be part of our research and wanted to have a conversation with us about this process as it unfolds. I had a chance to catch up with many of them in person recently at the annual Educause conference in Philadelphia. Let's hear a little bit more about what they have to say.
COVID-19 changed nearly every aspect of our lives. Perhaps nowhere is this more apparent than in higher education. Common challenges emerged: the need for remote teaching and learning, the use of video, the concern about cybersecurity, and the urgency to ensure the student experience embraces and engages a diverse audience with non-traditional expectations. Solutions exist, and in fall 2021, thought leaders shared their best practices for them at the Educause annual conference.
That's the one fear I think everybody has, is how do we keep that culture that we had, those things that made our institutions special? How do we keep that in a hybrid model, or when we have remote workers, how do you integrate them into the team?
There's really a need for students and all of the faculty, all of the advising staff, the counselors, and everyone who supports those students to be able to access data.
What I'm most proud of is just how, as an IT community, we band together. I mean, we didn't worry about, where people were, or titles, or reporting, or anything. It was, let's work together on this.
Interestingly, many of the common themes are problems that existed for years, yet were highlighted because of the pandemic. As demographic changes bring a potential for reduced enrollment, universities are embracing virtual and hybrid learning models as the new pathways.
I don't know that I have a crystal ball. I don't know that anyone does. But I think that that'll be our challenge moving forward, to figure out how we sort of breach the gaps across those tracks and make it work together.
Is our Wi-Fi, where we had one access point in a classroom, Was that good enough when there were 5 students in the classroom? Yes, but now if there's 50 students in the classroom, that's a whole completely different infrastructure. So we have to continue to evolve to stay one step ahead.
The technology can also bring that equalizer to the workplace. So I think that as a woman, especially as a Latina, I think all the benefits of being there, being in the conversation, the thing you bring to the table is a lens that is different, and it's an important lens to be heard.
Digital transformation is thinking about technology's contribution to the transformation of higher education.
I think we need to get much more flexible and adaptive in the security space, and I'm excited about that because we've been seen to be historically rigid and unchanging, and it's time for a change.
We have to be able to reach different populations. That really starts to bust open the whole idea of time and space, and those decisions have to be made at the cabinet level because it affects the entire enterprise.
The immediate shift spurred by the COVID-19 pandemic means institutions can no longer count on brand recognition and in-person engagement. That's where technology comes in to bridge the gap and level the playing field, reaching a diverse audience in the process.
People have seen the importance of building relationships outside of IT. And so I feel we have that culture to keep that going. I think one of the things, though, that we really have to be doing is being more conscientious about how we communicate what we're doing and why we're doing.
People are realizing that there are causes worth speaking up about, and that we are willing to maybe forego some of the immediate benefits of career progress so that those causes can be advanced first.
Many teachers will look at them and go, well, those kids are just not reachable. It's not that, there's something else going on, and if you'll take a second and look at them, if you look at their body language, if you look at their countenance, you can really put yourself in their shoes, meet them where they are, and pull you to where you want them to be.
We now have this kind of amazing opportunity, which was those walls of resistance have been torn down. And I think the pandemic was more about removing traditional resistance and now putting us on a path where, frankly, learners of all lifestyles and life stages are going to come to class and I think learn with each other.
Higher education consulting firm Lyft completed a study highlighting how leading institutions have been developing solutions like these for some time to accelerate transformative outcomes.
The reality is that this is a team sport, right? And working everyone forward to create that experience, working backward from the student experience that we want to create as a team effort, as a team job.
These thought leaders from progressive institutions and others like them have shown they are willing to win in the digital post-COVID age. As student engagement and experience continue to rapidly evolve, higher education is preparing to digitally transform the learning environment.
The skills you get today will always be applicable in the future.
Placing students at the center and recognizing that student success is institutional success.
You know, Jeff, talking to so many of those institutional leaders, it's really clear two things. One, we're not going back to status quo. And two, as you now are helping sort of prescribe, how can we be strategic about the way we move forward? And when we implement, you know, this technology tool and this sort of IT support, we have to keep the user in mind and that personal experience, that student experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this is a great episode if you're a student of strategy or you're just interested in how organizations, you know, adapt to change. But more importantly, if you've got, you know, a young person in your household that maybe is about to go to college or is in college, the whole idea of education is about to change. And I think it's sort of leading the edge for what we're seeing elsewhere. One thing is absolutely apparent. The world is no longer physical. We have both a physical and a virtual world, and we have to adjust our thinking to that, which means more choice, more flexibility, which is what we've always wanted but couldn't have until change, which is what we've been saying all along. Change is changing everything, came from nowhere and changed the entire formula for what great education is.
So we were in a unique position because not only had you had a history of working with a lot of these higher education institutions, but we also really had the chance, as we've highlighted in this episode, to catch up with how is it going, but what's to come. So let's hear more from these higher ed leaders from the annual Educause conference.
We all know there are a series of, I would say, external change pressures that are facing higher ed. One of those is demographic, the cliff, the changing student that we're going to be serving. These are disappearing, these 18 to 24-year-olds that we're used to in traditional higher ed.
The breakthrough for more flexible engagement has actually produced new operating models that make capacity go beyond the number of seats in a room, new pedagogical models that are more inclusive of people who may not be able to make it to a residential college or a campus every day, and are far more flexible.
I like people, and I'm real excited about building up the next set of IT leaders. So I spend a lot of time inside ITS, inside my division, supporting that leadership growth. The other thing that I'm really excited about is us as an institution becoming an R2, research intensive institution.
We're never going back. Right, so this idea of I can't wait till we get back to the way it used to be, that's never going to happen. Right, so we have to really understand that we have been fundamentally changed by this period, so we can't sort of continue to sort of long for the good old days. Instead, we have to think about what's going to be great about the new days.
From a hybrid work perspective, what does collaboration look like online? Because it can't just be online meetings in their current form. That's going to morph again. And how do you secure all of that?
Well, in the past, it was seen as a have to, or because somebody told me I had to, or something like that. And now it's a necessity. It's the way that, Grandma was able to see her grandkids for the last 18 months. It was the way that I was able to work with students from all over the place. It's the way we actually conducted rehearsals and got ready for a musical last spring. So it was no longer one of those, man, that'd be nice, or man, I'd really rather not because it's out of my comfort zone. It didn't matter if it was out of your comfort zone or not. As human beings, we long for that relationship with folks, whatever that modality needs to be. And at this point, this is where we are. And folks have really begun to adapt to it.
That's what pandemic has taught many people, in that the important things are not just the progress of career or maybe the salary increases, but it is looking back when you are much older. Are my kids happy? What are my relationships with kids and grandkids? And
let's talk about mentoring. How much did a mentor or mentors impact you along the way to leadership? What was it that influenced you? And, on that path, speak to how much of a difference that made for you, if at all.
I think the biggest, so it was helpful to have what I would call safe zones where, you, no matter what the role, you have a place or a person that you can confide in, or, where you can sort of bounce ideas off of, or complain about something. I mean, where you can just sort of get something out there and get some reaction and not have to worry about, how it's said or what's said, or, it's just my boss or whatever. So, I mean, I've had colleagues that I've worked with over the years where we've had that kind of a relationship. I think the most instrumental circumstance or mentor that I had, and I don't know, at the time I didn't really think about it as a mentor, but I think the most significant opportunity for me was when I took on the role of leading the network team. And I had put my name in the hat for the director of the enterprise applications team and was rejected. And then later, I think a year later or so, the director of the network position came open. And the person that they tapped for that was a seasoned leader, been there a long time. And his response was, I'll do it, but I want to do it as co-director with Michelle. And, I'm like, what? Where did that come from? And so we ended up as co-directors. It was the most important aspect to my career, in my view, because it gave me an opportunity. Like I said, he'd been in the field a very long time, seasoned leader, different style. You know, he had a different style than what I had. And so it was complementary in terms of our approach.
When you think of that role that you're in as a member of the cabinet, if you had the floor and could speak to everybody in that cabinet boardroom, and they said, Michelle, what is your vision for how you're going to lead technology for Rutgers in the coming months and years? How do you encapsulate that in, you know, your sort of elevator speech and your 30,000-foot flyover view?
I'm not sure I'm very good with elevator speeches, but, you know, what I have said and would say to the cabinet is, you know, if we've learned anything in this last couple of years, if we've learned anything, it's how important technology is, how reliant we are on technology. And I think we have a new level of awareness. And so I continually message around the fact that we cannot operate without technology. We have to continually strive to leverage it in better ways. I think higher ed generally, that's just been, you know, we've not necessarily thought about it that way until now. And I think there's a higher level of awareness. And we need to be positioned. Rutgers needs, you know, Rutgers is a prominent institution, and our ability to continue to do so or be prominent, it includes the role of technology. So, that's usually the context for my messaging. We work on this together. This is not just me. You know, I'm there to represent technology and advocate for it and help us think about our strategy. But we're doing this together. You know, I can't do it by myself. The other leaders on the cabinet have to be instrumental in those concepts and the role of technology. And so it's we're working together with them, on moving that forward. But yeah, I think we've learned a lot in this industry about, the role technology plays.
So Dr. Ken Barron is joining us, a friend to our team, in that you have just been somebody that we've so enjoyed working with that we keep coming back to pick your brain and get your insight in an industry, higher ed in this case, where so much has evolved, especially during the COVID timeframe. So Ken, just get us up to speed on what work you've been doing and how things are going with the whole process of being a leader in higher ed.
Yeah, it was, I thank you for some of the advanced questions, and I've been reflecting on this one, and going back to that time in March when we just started to learn about COVID, and then the reality of, well, we're going to be working from home at first, maybe just for a few days or a few weeks, and then the transition into this extended period has been just remarkable. And I was just going back and thinking about, there was the initial feelings of, I wouldn't call it panic, but some concerns and how are we going to do this? And what's it going to look like? What's it going to mean for our staff? What's it going to mean for our students? But then luckily for us, I think in enrollment management here at UMBC, we'd already been working on business continuity. We had some plans in place to look at if we were going to be closed for a day or a week or an extended period of time. But then COVID came and gave us this real challenge of, no, you're going to be operating differently for an extended period of time. We're not even sure how long. And so I think while we had some business continuity plans written down, we all kind of chuckled a bit at how they weren't really sizing up to the situation or the challenge, but that we had the instincts going. We had already been kind of we were already exercising in the past our ability to start to imagine, well, how would we get some of this work done, and how would we go about performing, and what technologies would we be relying upon? And then in terms of our connection with you all through Do It, you know, a lot of those things became a lot more easier for us to start to understand and start to imagine in terms of using WebEx for advising appointments and for individual meetings. And the mystery and the concerns started to fade away. And then as we became more competent and more confident in using the tools, all of a sudden we began to become, we became converts and we became advocates of, we're getting this done and there's some competitive advantages to this work. So I think, we're in a stage now where we're back, we're back on campus again. Many of us have the opportunity to work remotely. Here in enrollment management, we're given the opportunity to work remotely for 2 days out of the week. And the rest of the time we're here back on campus. And we have provisions related to COVID, so we're masked. And some of the things we're just having to do our best with, and it's not ideal. But I feel like we're in a new world now, and these tools are not going to go away. And we're also starting to imagine once COVID, this era completely ends, what will we continue to be using and how will we be continuing to use these tools, because they've certainly proven themselves effective.
And I have to do a follow-up question. What makes you the most proud when you reflect on everything that you and your team were able to accomplish with, as you described, not a lot of plans in place?
I think in some ways it enabled us to really focus on our mission and the nature of the work. What's the most important elements of, and it's really working with students and connecting with them and finding that way to remain loyal and authentic to the nature of the work that we do, which is highly personal, highly humanistic in nature, and not letting the technology get in the way of that. I mean, we've really transitioned and pivoted in such a way that students are still feeling connected to us. We were able to execute that orientation program that we're really proud of, that includes one-on-one advising that we've had, ever since, I've been here and before, and this is my 15th year of service at UMBC, so I've been through 15 orientation rodeos, so to speak. But that one-on-one model, which is pretty unique, that we've held on to that. And so that humanistic element of what's important about advising, what's important about connecting with students, listening to them, solving problems, and then some of the advantages of highlighting some of the technology or sharing some of the elements of degree audits or degree planning tools with them so that they can see where they stand. And maybe some of those things we weren't so apt to use or focus on when we were working in person, because the person was sitting, right across from us. And it's easy for us to look at the screen and then talk to them and not really involve them as much. So I think what I'm proud of is that we've remained authentic and genuine to our mission and to our brand. I like in our office to the Statue of Liberty on campus. You bring us, you're tired, you're undecided, you're disconnected, people who just need a friendly voice, need someone to share their situation with. We end up being that office where people come to just get help. And through the virtual front counter that we established after the first couple of weeks of COVID, we were able to maintain that connection. We don't have a phone tree. When you call our office, someone answers the phone and talks to you. Or if you come up to our office in person, there's someone there to greet you between 8:30 and 5. And we try to replicate that as best we could through the electronic tools. And now we're kind of in a hybrid situation where we are open, but some students are preferring to connect with us online or coming in. We're giving them the option to see us as advisors, either in person or virtually. So it's an interesting time for us to experience with respect to the transition in work. But I'm most proud of the fact that we were able to manage and maintain our mission and our brand of being that helping office on campus.
It was a very challenging year, if not probably one of your most challenging in your career. But I have to ask, in some ways, was it among the most rewarding?
Absolutely. Having to really go back and learn new things. I've been around for quite a while. This is, I said, my 15th year at UMBC, and I've spent time at the University of Tennessee in the past, at Emory University, spent some time abroad at a British and American accredited school, AIU London, and traveled around the world with the semester at sea program. I learned a lot and developed some really interesting skills and had amazing experiences, but I was kind of back in the classroom again, trying to figure out and working, along with everyone else on how are we going to make this work? How are we going to leverage these tools? How are we going to be able to offer those services? And so it was a really healthy thing to go back and then just to reimagine how things could be, but asking for help and having it be okay to not have all the answers and letting the staff know, like, we don't have all the answers. We're just going to do the best we can. We're going to communicate. We're going to connect with the resources on campus, connect with our Do It division, connect with our campus partners, our advising community.
So we have a unique opportunity moving into this season of Willing to Win to talk about some of the research that you've been working on for years, and you're going to preview specifically some of the higher education findings later this year. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I will tell you, the season 3 of Willing to Win, which will be coming in just a little while, is all about getting things done in organizations. And we had a really great opportunity to examine that during the COVID pandemic. And one of the things that was a hypothesis for us long before the pandemic was the idea that all the rules that existed before, those things that we counted on, were suddenly up for grabs. In higher education, they were suddenly met with this need for a virtual classroom. And many of the universities said, okay, you can pick your platform, how you do your virtual classroom. You could decide that on your own because that's part of academic freedom. Others said, no, this virtual classroom is an extension of the regular classroom, the physical classroom, and we need to have it secure, we need training around it, we need to make it consistent for our brand. And we see two very different university types, two very different kinds of brands coming out the other side.
So there's no question that so much has changed, and now the pandemic has really accelerated the digital transformation for so many industries, especially higher education. Thanks for joining us for this special episode of Willing to Win.
We will see you next season.
Willing to Win is produced by Lift Productions. Guests on the program are not compensated, nor is their appearance representative of the Willing to Win views. Willing to Win does not necessarily endorse any people, products, or services.